Ken James and Jason McKittrick. Brought to you by CryptoCurium.
Good evening and welcome to the first intro episode of Learning Lovecraft. I am one of your hosts, Jason McKittrick, joined by my co-host, Ken James.
Hi, I'm the rookie, and I'm here to learn with you.
And really, that's what it's about, right? I mean, this is what we're going to be doing here. Learning Lovecraft. We're going to be taking this journey together because lots of people seem to be interested in Lovecraft. I think there's a lot of certainly misconceptions, and there's also, because of the breadth of his output, I think he can seem a little bit impenetrable, and it's hard for people to find an inroad to him.
Well, I was going to say, for me personally, as you know, you got a newcomer, coming into it, it's going to be nice to know where to start.
Right.
I have you that is going to guide me through this universe and this mythos.
Right.
So I'm not going in with a flashlight and some trail mix trying to find my way.
Well, I mean, you'd fare better than some of his protagonists. So, yeah. So basically, kind of came up with this idea of, I talk about Lovecraft nonstop, and I've based a good portion of my life recreating his creations and things based off of his creations in my artwork for over a decade at this point. And I thought it would be interesting and fun, at least, to kind of take a journey through the Lovecraft stories.
Right.
Go chronological. Go over them. I've read them all numerous times in some cases, and then go through it with someone who's never read any of it.
And I think a big thing of it, too, a big chunk of it might be that you're tired of making jokes or references to Lovecraft things, and me just like doing the
Yeah, I think that definitely works. But
we spent enough time together where I need to get on board.
Sure. And I think the interesting dynamic that I think and hope that we're going to bring to this is that I'm someone that's been a fan for a long time, and Ken is someone who is more of a general horror fan.
Right.
And I think it'll be interesting for you to read these stories together and see things like, oh, that was in this movie.
Yeah, right.
Or, oh, that was from here. And then you'll be like, wow, he came up with this in the 20s.
Yeah,
he came up with this in the 30s. And that happens a lot, and I've seen that happen a lot with things. And I think that's kind of like the core of what we're going to be doing here. Like, let's go through the man's work based on its own merits and treat the stories as they are. Of course, we're going to give you some historical context on each story. We're going to go through, read them. We're going to go in chronological order, which I think makes the most sense, because it is going to be learning Lovecraft, because I think actually he didn't really become Lovecraft until maybe halfway through the story streams, because there's definitely a period of time that we're going to get to where it's like, oh wow, these are I had to sift through some not great stories to get to some of these good stories.
And I think too, a big thing is me, I've always wanted to get into it, and this is kind of the kick I've needed to get my foot in and start digging into the actual meat of the material, because we've had many conversations when we've been out to dinner or stuff, and it's just been me and you, and you would explain stuff to me, and you'd see me with wide-eyed regale and wait, what? And so this is finally, it's also catching up Ken for the learning Lovecraft. So.
I think I think it's going to be fun. So basically for this episode, we're just going to do a little primer. I mean, if you already know who Lovecraft is, this is just going to be, retreading some familiar territory. A little bio. I can't go completely into it. If you want an exhaustive biography, you can pick up S.T. Joshi's I Am Providence, which we will be pulling from liberally, because it's he's the authority on the subject. H.P. Lovecraft, before we get into his bio, before I ever mentioned it, if anyone ever said to you, H.P. Lovecraft, what would that have meant to you, or would you have known anything, or does that have any kind of like...
Yeah, I mean, so from like the shows and movies, you'd hear the name drop or be a reference, and someone would say something, and I've kind of over the years, I mean, even before, me and you becoming like this, I'm doing the finger crossing thing.
We're good buddies.
Yeah, we're good buddies, if you didn't get that. But, you always hear Cthulhu, right? Or some people would say Cthulhu. Mm-hmm. But I go back to that the Real Ghostbusters episode. Right. The call to...
The collect call of Cthulhu.
Yeah. And I was, I'm a little kid, and I'm like, I don't know this. But then years later, back, on YouTube, I would have a 24-hour, the Real Ghostbusters channel on one of my devices. Yeah. And then I'm like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, this when I was a kid, I didn't get it. So that would be my first
Gotcha.
run-in.
And I think that's everyone's primer. Like, even if you didn't know it, because Ghostbusters is actually a good primer for Lovecraft, because especially that first movie, all that paranormal stuff that's going on is only because this essentially eldritch entity that is Gozer the Gozerian has come into our time-space continuum,
right,
which is essentially a Lovecraftian entity.
Concept.
It really is. Okay. And because of that, and Dan Aykroyd knew that when they were writing this.
Sure he did.
He did.
Yeah.
He references it.
Yeah.
That's really what's at the heart of that story. They're using this, fringe science to try to battle these, or at least try to just close a portal, because that's all they really do.
Right.
And all the ghosts are kind of like incidental. Yes, they do catch ghosts,
right,
but those ghosts have only showed up because
as a byproduct
of Ivo Shandor and his building that has, it's so Lovecraftian that like, going back, like after years later when I finally got into Lovecraft and read all the stories and got into it, I was like, oh my God, this is a Lovecraft story, like with some comedy injected.
Right.
And even to the point where, and we'll get to the story later, clearly it's very much like kind of like the Dunwich Horror, where Lovecraft, like they stop Gozer, but just for now. Like, they close the portal. That's all that they did. Yeah. This entity lives beyond time and space, essentially. Yeah. So they stopped it for now, and they have a party, but eventually it's just not going to work out. I mean, and kind of Ghostbusters, kind of the way that they use their comedy in that film also kind of goes hand in hand really with Lovecraft's conception of things, because it's all this gallows humor and this kind of like humor that's going around where it's like they're laughing, Venkman's kind of laughing at these things that are happening, but he's the kind of guy that knows, like, I'm just laughing to just, keep, to try to keep it going, because
it's like the laughter at a funeral. It's that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's even a famous quote from Lovecraft where it's, the universe is indeed funny, but the joke is on mankind. So,
and and it's funny.
Yeah.
The Ghostbusters thing, there has always been something under the surface.
Yeah.
That, like, I've joked about with you, where I talk to other people with like the lore that's underneath that.
Yeah.
And if you dive into that, it becomes a wholly different film.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Unbelievably.
Yeah, and that has always kind of been something that has made it such a big part of my, like, kind of like, and me and you, it's kind of like one of the glues of our friendship.
Absolutely.
So, like, and I think that kind of is a great starting point for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people.
Yeah.
To kind of like, all right, let's kind of break beyond what's on the other side of those, of crossing the streams.
Right, exactly. So if you can understand that conception, that on the other side of our reality, there's constantly these other entities, kind of looking in at all times. Maybe they can't get in right now, but they will eventually, or through the help of cultists or deranged artists or whatever, will eventually kind of come through. So that's a good example, because if you grasp that, you can basically grasp most of the stuff with Lovecraft, because that's more in his quote unquote mythos type stories. So I guess if I were to answer, I guess Ghostbusters would be also my first, but before that, which would be his other most famous creation aside from Cthulhu, would be the Necronomicon.
Right.
So when I was younger, and I'm sure a lot of kids, you go through that phase where, like, or maybe you don't go, maybe everyone does go through the phase, but in the 80s you had the Satanic Panic going on, right? Right?
Yeah.
Right? So, and everyone had, the Satanic Bible, but then every once in a while, he's got a Necronomicon. And you wouldn't know what that meant. When I was a kid, I just thought, I was like, oh, what's that? I thought it was literally like the evil Bible. That's literally what I thought it was.
And then the movie Evil Dead,
yes.
Was,
and then
of course,
Right. And that informs it too. So then it's like, oh, I heard about it, but then it's here. So it kind of, which is another Lovecraftian conception that Lovecraft tried to bring about, was this verisimilitude, where he wanted to, when he would write a story, he would put his creations alongside real things.
Yes.
So you'd be like, wait, is that real then? So, like, oh, here's the Necronomicon, but then it's also next to these other books by other, like, ancient philosophers or, occult scholars or whatever they were.
Right.
So it would make it a little more real, and he was very into that, because he wanted to confuse, because like, oh, these things, maybe they are.
Not to jump ahead, the first story I read last night in preparation for this, right away, he gives you, this is what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. I don't know how much of it is real and how much of it isn't, but here's what happened, and I'm here now.
Right.
You know, like...
Right. That's the unreliable narrator occurs again and again in Lovecraft. And he gets her right from the beginning with that, because if you know the chronology, the first story we're doing is the tomb, and the dream world affecting the real world is that's pure Lovecraft. So yeah. So that's basically where we are. But anyway, the Necronomicon, I would hear about this thing, and like I would hear it all the time, and it would be like this thing where it'd be like the Satan worshippers, this and that, and like, oh, they have a Necronomicon. And I remember hearing that over and over again, and I remember seeing a copy of one, because there's one that's called the Simon Necronomicon, where they actually try to turn into like, oh, there's symbols, and like there's like Lovecraftian entities in there, like Yog-Sothoth is in there, Cthulhu's in there, Nyarlathotep's in there, I think. And it was like, it became almost like real, and which was really interesting to me, because later on, learning these things, we're like, oh, he did this on purpose. He wanted you to think that this stuff was real, and it went, and it's kind of cool. And even in his lifetime, people thought, they're like, oh, where did you? They would ask him like, oh, where did you, research about the Necronomicon? We want to hear. He's like, it's fake. Yeah, even in his day, he was like, fake.
I made it.
Yeah,
and it's funny too, because I remember being a kid, and like, I'd be at church a lot, and sometimes we'd watch these documentaries on, like there's one called like Hell's Bells and all these ones about Satan and all this stuff in the real world. And a couple times they've mentioned the Necronomicon like it was a real thing, you know? Yes. And even as a child, I'm like, that was an Evil Dead, man. Like, what?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No,
I just watched Army of Darkness. What are you talking about?
Yes.
So it is funny that such a good piece of fiction, we've said this before, other times, other places, can affect the hive mind of people.
Right. No, it's it works, and I think and I forget who made the point, because it's been a while, but when you don't know Lovecraft, but you know other horror things, you kind of like know Lovecraft through his like influence. You may not know the stories, but you're like, oh, like, well, Stephen King kind of talks about him sometimes, so all right, so maybe there's some influence there. And John Carpenter certainly references in films, so it's like, okay, so there's got to be something there. And then, so his effects are there, but you haven't seen him itself. He is almost like a Lovecraftian entity in himself, you know what I mean? So it's certainly kind of interesting. Okay, so we're going to lean a little bit on Wikipedia here just to keep things succinct, because we do have a bio here, but I think his bio is really going to unfold as we go through the stories, because like I said, we're going to have, we're going to give you the historical context on things, and we're also going to have some excerpts from his writings, which are many. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born August 20, 1890 in Providence, Rhode Island. An American writer of weird science fiction and fantasy and horror fiction. He is best known for his creation of the Cthulhu mythos. He spent most of his life in New England, and after his father's institutionalization in 1893, he lived affluently until his family's wealth dissipated after the death of his grandfather. Lovecraft then lived with his mother in reduced financial security until her institutionalization in 1919. Yeah. That it figures heavily in his stories. He began to write essays for the United Amateur Press Association, and in 1913 wrote a critical letter to a pulp magazine that ultimately led to his involvement in pulp fiction, not the film. Interesting addiction, though. He became active in the speculative fiction community and was published in several pulp magazines. Lovecraft moved to New York City, marrying Sonia Green in 1924, and later became the center of a wider group of authors known as the Lovecraft Circle. It's kind of cool. During your time, you have a circle named after you. They introduced him to Weird Tales, which would become his most prominent publisher. Lovecraft's time in New York took a toll on his mental state and financial conditions. Like New York does. Yeah, like it does. He returned to Providence in 1926 and produced some of his most popular works, including The Call of Cthulhu, At the Mountains of Madness, The Shadow over Innsmouth, and The Shadow Out of Time. He would remain active as a writer for 11 years until his death from intestinal cancer at the age of 46. Yeah, his death, we'll go over it when we get to it, but wow. Yeah, so it's important to note that his literary work is based around the idea of cosmicism. That's his main like philosophy at the center of his stories, which was simultaneously his personal philosophy and the main theme of his fiction. Cosmicism posits that humanity is an insignificant part of the cosmos and could be swept away at any moment. He incorporated fantasy and science fiction elements into his stories, representing the perceived fragility of anthropocentrism, meaning that man is at the center. This was tied to his ambivalent views on knowledge. His works were largely set in a fictionalized version of New England. He has all his fictionalized towns: Arkham, Dunwich, Innsmouth.
The book, the one you gifted me in this whole price, and I first opened it and I saw the map of Arkham.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, I'm in for it. I took a moment to kind of like, okay. I had music on in the background and I was like, oh, this is going to be a ride, man.
It is, and you know what? You're going to be better for it. Civilizational decline also plays a major role in his works, as he believed that the West was in decline during his lifetime. Lovecraft's early political opinions were conservative and traditionalist. Additionally, he held a number of racist views for much of his adult life. That's an important note to go past here, because I think if you're going to discuss Lovecraft in any way, shape, or form, you have to discuss his views on everything. Just as important it is to that cosmicism was his main philosophy, his racism certainly informed a lot of his views on the world around him, and it also trickled into his fiction. It seemed to have waned in the later years, but it's important that we do note that this is a deeply flawed human being, but he was a human being of his time. And I know I might get, decried for that, but he really was a man of his time. And being born in New England in 1890, you're going to have some views that are certainly not going to be compatible with, the United States of the 21st century. Sure. Now, I think it's important to say that obviously he has these views. Neither Ken nor I share these views, but
certainly not.
Certainly not. But he is an interesting figure, and he is like the influence on most horror that is produced in the last, almost century. So, and
that's why I'm here.
Right.
Not for the man he was, but for his works.
For his works. And we're here for his works, and we're very aware of, the outsider and alien that he almost was, because he was so far removed from the societies that he lived in, that he developed these kind of views. So we're trying, obviously we're trying to tread lightly around it. We don't want to get anybody pissed off. We don't, clearly he's a guy that, you come to some people come to his stuff and be like, oh, all this, I'm out. And we respect that decision. And I can certainly see how people would not want to read his stuff because of that being in there. However, I don't think someone who was completely, and I regret to use the term normal, but anyone who was completely well-adjusted may have not produced these works.
And what my whole theory of the whole thing is, like, if you're going to learn about our history as our country, there's going to be a lot of bad marks on there.
Oh, absolutely.
To know about the person, you have to know the flaws as well.
Right.
And, I'm not saying to accept them or anything like that. No. It's just, in my personal opinion, it's just, I want to learn, like I said, the works. Yeah. And I still, you still do have to learn about the bad spots.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're going to discuss anything that, any person in American history, there's going to be some kind of racial component at some point. Sure. And he was also somebody that was an antiquarian at heart. I think he wanted to have existed probably a century earlier. He was an Anglophile. He was very obsessed with England. He was actually thought that the revolution was a bad thing. Strange cat. But if he wasn't, he wouldn't have produced all these amazing pieces of fiction. So I'm not giving him a pass, obviously, but I think because he had these ways about him, it certainly informed his imagination and the way that he saw things, and why he produced such amazing pieces of fiction. So he had to have been a secluded weirdo, at least a part of his life, and had some of these reprehensible ideas to have produced the things that he did, I think. So I think that that's, unless we come to a story that has overt racism in it, we're not going to just keep hammering that home, because I know, if you're a Lovecraft fan and have been a Lovecraft fan since the last decade, it's everywhere. So we know it, we're acknowledging it. Here it is. But moving forward, we just want to focus on the work, unless unless it is a specific story that has a lot of it in it, which there really aren't too many. Just wanted to get through that.
And as the guy that has read 2 Lovecraft stories so far, I agree.
So, okay, so now that we've gotten through that, I just wanted to say that this man's creations have really been an enrichment to my life. I mean, it's his creations once again, and I just wanted to go through I really want to go through his stories again and really go through them, enjoy them. Not so much pick them apart, but
hold my hand and walk me through them,
and show you where all this stuff is, and and through the process of learning Lovecraft, I hope that this is something that others will take with us, but we're not scholars. I'm an artist. Ken's
I'm a lot of things, man.
He's a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yeah. I wear a lot of hats.
But I think at the heart we're both horror fans.
Yes.
And
another one of the glues of our friendship.
Right. And I think that it's fun that I think we're also like one of the many ends of the horror genre or space or whatever you want to call it. Ken's definitely in the general horror, is a fan of a lot of the horror, slashers, all the stuff that I am too. But I think this is a facet that like Ken never got into. So I was like, well, let me tell you about it. So basically, I have to do this whole podcast just so Ken can know who Lovecraft is.
Exactly. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of this is from Jay making references and jokes, and me just like doing the
with the wide eyes though.
And I actually want one thing that. We were at the Tiffany's, and I brought up before, but you were making a reference to the whole uncaring universe thing. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I had to go outside and chain smoke 3 cigarettes before I could come back in, finish my beers. But yeah, it was a concept that at times I'm not going to say I wasn't ready for, but it took me by surprise where the conversation went. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I definitely, I'm not being held captive to this.
No.
It's definitely something that I've been wanting to...
Say that again, closer to the microphone.
Yeah. Don't send help. Yeah. I'm okay. But, it's definitely something that, like I said, this is the kick in the butt that I've kind of needed to get my face out of screens and get back into the reading. And if I'm going to do that, it's got to be something worthwhile, right? And, I'm of the time of shared universes and all this stuff, and it's about time I got into the meat of one of the greatest, or the greatest, most pivotal horror writer of all time, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's certainly folks that there's the 3. You got Poe, Lovecraft, and King, and that's most people agree that those are the 3.
Yeah,
you don't have one without the other.
The Mount Rushmore of horror writing.
And we'll definitely talk about Poe's influence on Lovecraft because Lovecraft literally called Poe his god of fiction. Right. So,
and he mentioned him in the first story.
Oh yeah.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. His first story is essentially a Poe story. It's certainly going to be a fun journey, and we're inviting you to come on this journey with us.
Come with me, guys, because I'm going to need people to talk to, because I'm sure Jay has, he has his own peers. I don't, besides my brother Eric, who's going to be coming along. Yeah. Welcome, Eric. Thanks for coming with me, bud. But for the rest of you guys who've, want to get into this subject, I invite you, because I'm going to need people to talk about it with it that just aren't Jay.
Yeah. So exactly. So we're gonna take it slow. We're certainly gonna go through all the stories, but we're gonna do the social media thing, and if you're gonna listen, we'll have a platform if anyone wants to speak to us about it. But before I go any further, because I don't want to forget, I have to give a shout out to the ones who came before, because they really were the impetus for doing this podcast, but also me getting back into Lovecraft heavily about a decade ago. And I have to shout out the 2 gentlemen at HP Podcraft, Chris Lackey and Chad Pfeiffer. Their original podcast was hugely influential, and honestly was one of those one of those podcasts that was there for me and when I needed it, and it's I just want to shout out to them because they did it first, and it was great, and it still continues to be great, and I thank them for their creation.
Now we swim in your wake.
Basically. Before we get any further with that, we were talking a little bit about modern influences of Lovecraft, and if you're listening to this, you probably know most of these, but we mentioned Stephen King. He has a lot. It is a Lovecraft story,
right?
Pennywise is a Lovecraftian entity. By every shape and size, it just is. The Thing by John Carpenter is a loose adaptation of kind of at the Mountains of Madness. This creature that is basically unknowable, other than that it just takes the form of whatever it absorbs, but we don't know its motives. What's it doing here? How long has it been here? What could happen? Is this it, or is this or is this like a lesser life form made by a larger alien that this is like one of their like attack dogs? We have no idea what it is.
Yeah, and only Kurt Russell and Keith David could stop it.
Unless Keith David was also the Thing. Some people believe. We'll get to that.
Yeah, sure.
So the Stuart Gordon films, most people will know Reanimator, even though they are not faithful adaptations to the stories so much, a lot of folks will know those, like, oh, those are Lovecraft stories. And then when we get to the actual stories of those, we're like, oh, okay, where's all the boobs and stuff? Yeah, there's no boobs in Lovecraft. Only existential dread.
And you know what? It's funny, too, because, like, starting my journey last night, right?
Yeah.
And, like, all the movies that I know that people have perceived as Lovecraftian, and people, like, I've been there when people brought them up to you. Yeah. And I see the look of just dread, or, like, that, like...
Yeah.
Okay, you're like, you know what? You have to talk to another person right now. Yeah. So don't, like, and I'll see it, and you'll be like, and you have to go, like, and I know it's one of those things where I've known you've said it to 1,000 people before. You go, well, listen, and then you have to go down this avenue and tread lightly to not fully, I don't want to say offend, but you're like, yes, I see why you would perceive this and people would as it's Lovecraft, but let me tell you something about the situation. Exactly. I know now from reading the first two, there is no boobs in Lovecraft.
No, there certainly is not. And there's also no winning. I mean, really, I mean, it'll become readily apparent as we go through. But there's certainly there's that old, well, not even old joke, but joke among Lovecraftians that, oh, there's tentacles in it, must be Lovecraftian. Yeah, right. It's like, well, no, and you can't fight these things really. Like, it's like, oh, well, let's, there's
no like mighty heroes.
I mean, there's heroes, but you can't. There's no prevailing. You just can't. Like, you just can't. Like, there's just. You'll see as it goes along, like entities like Cthulhu, it's like you can't even look at it. When you look at Cthulhu, you go insane. And he's not even all matter. He's not even 100% in our space continuum. He is a little bit, but not also. He's not made of real matter. How do you fight that? How do you fight that, meme makers of Godzilla versus Cthulhu? It's not a thing. He's also not a monster. Like, he's an ancient alien intelligence beyond our conception. He doesn't even notice us. Oh, like, it would be a thing if you just, like... Whatever.
Jay can see the smoke coming out of my ears right now on that concept.
Yeah.
Oh, and for those of you who don't know,
and that's just Cthulhu.
One of the hats that I wear is a very big fear of the endlessness of space.
Oh yeah.
We've gone over it in our other podcast. So one of Ken James's hats is terrified of the space beyond nothingness.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get there. Wait till we read some of the.
Sure. I can't wait.
Yeah, wait till we start talking about stories that have like Yog-Sothoth in there.
Sure,
like,
sure. And that's going to be a part of the fun. Of the listeners, guys that are just tuning in. There might be some panic attacks now and again on my end. There's been a couple in our previous
other
works.
venture.
Yeah. So join me and us for the hilarity of me losing my mind at points.
Right. So if we actually are able to use Lovecraft stories to drive another human being insane, I feel like that's that's a feather in our cap.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Right. And me being the guy,
Yeah.
The title Learning Lovecraft is because I and you will be learning it.
Yeah.
This guy.
Yeah.
he might lose his mind a couple times.
Here, Ken, read this incantation real quick.
Yeah, right. And it'll be super Lovecraftian for me to end up in a mental institution after we're done this podcast.
Yeah, and me lamenting it.
Oh, that's probably going to be the end. Is that I think the end of this, Jay is creating one of the Lovecraft characters.
Right.
And I'll end up sending him a letter like, here I am in the halls of Arkham. What I am about to tell you is, I'm telling Jay a story of which,
And you don't know how Lovecraftian that is, because it's also a Lovecraftian trope for the characters who are dying from insanity or a monster coming. They're writing as they're going insane and the monster's coming to get them.
Yeah.
Which is...
And then when Jay gets the letter, he shares it, he gets it published, he's like, this is my life's work.
Right.
This is what I've wanted to do my whole life.
We are selling the movie rights now. Ken gets nothing.
Yeah, right. I'll be gone. Dude.
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah, right.
And then my wife was just like, Jay, great work.
Thanks.
Great work.
Exactly. Yep. So, just moving forward a little bit, I want to go over just to give you guys an idea of a little bibliography, some of the texts we're going to be pulling from. So, if you want to, follow along. So, the hard copies we're going to be pulling from are the two collections, Necronomicon and Eldritch Tales. It's from the Gallant London imprint. It's the very cool black covers with the gold embossed Cthulhu and looks like a Dagon. You probably know it very well. That's the ones we're going to be pulling from. But if you do not have, if you don't have the ability to get hard copies, you can go over to the fantastic hplovecraft.com, run by Donovan Laux. They have all of his text in the most corrected editions possible that can be read right there from the website. So please feel free to pull from there. That also has a lot of great information over there aside from just his stories.
And when you were handing those to me as a gift, like these versions, I felt like a big deal. I'm like, oh wow, these. I'm being entrusted these. I mean, and it's just horror fiction, but like it's like, wow, these. It's real. It's real, Jay. But when you're getting handed them and gifted them, I was just like, wow, like nice books. Yeah. It's I got excited to dig in, and I didn't want to get too in depth until it was time.
Exactly. We're also going to be pulling from research from a few of S.T. Joshi's publications. Mr. Joshi, the most respected Lovecraft scholar, he's responsible for finding the corrected texts, finding original manuscripts, and correcting the texts that were butchered during publication, which we'll go into, I'm sure, at some point. But we're using some of his annotated Lovecraft books. There's 2 editions, Annotated Lovecraft and More Annotated Lovecraft. I'm also pulling from his amazing biography, I Am Providence, which is exhaustive, and thankfully, because there's so much good stuff in there. And then also I'll be pulling from the H.P. Lovecraft Encyclopedia, also from Mr. Joshi, as well as 2 books by Mr. Kenneth Haidt, which is the Tour de Lovecraft, the Tales, and the newest edition, the Destinations, which are both fantastic. And I will also be pulling from the new annotated Lovecraft by Leslie Klinger, which came out a few years ago. Also a fantastic edition, and they're very cheap on Barnes & Noble, and they are amazing editions. Very thick.
It's a thick boy.
Yeah. Not all the stories are in there, but his annotations are great, and he also did a version of Dracula. I think he did Frankenstein as well, and his annotations are really, really good. So had to pull from there because it's different perspective.
I feel that in this journey too, there's going to be so many words I'm going to learn.
Sure.
Because I'll be like, wow, that's a $5 word to you, and you go, is it? And I'm like, oh.
Dude, you're going to come across some like $100 words.
Oh, I already did. I already did the first 2.
Yeah.
And then you spend so much time going to the thrall.
Yeah.
I ponder on the thrall a lot. Last night. After I was done reading, I popped on God of War and Christmas movies, and I just kept going, thrall.
Yeah.
The thrall.
Oh, he already got in there then.
Yeah, he's already in there. Oh, it's swimming, dude. There's a tentacle.
Perfect.
With it's wrapped around my brain.
All right. Well, this was just meant to be kind of like a short intro, first short intro episode. If you think we're a bunch of clowns, you don't have to go to episode 2.
Yes, you do.
Or if you do think we're a bunch of clowns, you do need to go to episode 2. But like we said, we're not scholars. I'm a lifelong fan, a devotee even. And I would say that I think it's really fun to be passing this along to somebody else.
Well,
Hopefully,
and
who
most of your
appreciates it.
works and a lot, well, not most, but a lot of your works were Lovecraft inspired, and that was kind of actually the real big intro to Lovecraft to me.
Yeah.
Was because we've been friends for so long, and like seeing your works and your artwork, and like having no reference of what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Yeah. Okay, and it's taken me years, but thankfully I'm having this opportunity to finally understand some of the insanity that you've produced, And I mean that.
I appreciate it.
As high praise.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I'm not, I'm not trying to bring the, my business too much into it, but I'm the owner of Cryptocurium. I've created Lovecraft work for the last decade or so, and it's been a constant. His Lovecraft stories has been a constant source of inspiration. So it's good to be that I'm going to be going through the stories like this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to bring the fun. We're not scholars. I don't want to. This isn't going to be a stuffy version. I mean, yes, we're going to have facts. We're going to tell you about stuff. It's going to be fun, but we're going to have trick beers every episode. But
that'll be mostly me because
right.
I'm going to need it to get through some of the
possibly
insanity once again.
Right.
I'll be reading, even though once again, avid horror fan.
Yeah,
I've seen the likes of some of the best and worst horror movies and the stuff they can throw at you that can get pretty dicey. No, this is more cerebral.
Yes,
and that's the stuff that actually gets me.
Yeah.
So come be my security blanket, gang.
Excellent. So for the inaugural episode of Learning Lovecraft, I've been Jason McKittrick.
And I've been Ken James.
And we'll see you on the other side of sleep.